Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Board Sports Media NFL podcast coming to you a week later than planned. I do need to, as I always start off the show by thank you for listening, but I do need to start off this week with a little bit of an apology. Well, two apologies, as it so matters. First, I do apologize for not getting a show out last week, but it was Thanksgiving over in the United States, as everyone in the United States will know, and there was just late changes of plans and organization and everything for where we were going to go for Thanksgiving, and I just honestly just did not have the time to get the recording out, especially when factoring in the little child as well. Just didn't work out, so I just couldn't get anything out last week. So I do apologize for that. And a second apology, I do also apologize for I have come down with something. I do not know what, I do not know why, I do not know how, but I've come down with something over the past couple of days. It's really starting to hit me today. So if I do sound slightly off, it may be the recording technology as well, but it is mainly whatever I've come down with: cold, flu, congestion, whatever. I don't know, but everyone in the household has it. We're hoping it's nothing too serious, especially now, as I said, with the young kid involved. But nothing. It's nothing too serious for me. It just my voice may just sound a little bit different than normal. So just two apologies on that front. But with that out of the way, I do want to, as always, thank you very much for joining and listening to me. Don't forget you can like and subscribe on YouTube where you are listening to this. Don't forget to hit the bell icon, leave a comment, do everything you need to do to make sure that you are kept abreast of the debate and the show and everything that goes on moving forward. And don't forget you can also follow us on our other social medias. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. I know I say on YouTube, but it's just become such a thing now that I just can't not have it. It's been with me since day one, and I can't just not say it. But it also means you can maybe find the channel earlier if if you've somehow got this some other way. Feel free to listen to it that way and subscribe that way as well. And we are on Twitter at MRB Sports Media, so feel free to give us a follow there. If you are new, as always, welcome. And if you are returning, then as always, thank you very much for continuing to be part of this every single week. And with that, we get on to the first topic of the week. Now, usually I go for something that's slightly more bigger picture, something that happens off the field, rather something maybe that's happening in front offices or within the NFL headquarters or on the bigger picture on the NFL landscape. But today I'm not going to do that because I feel like it is time for us to talk. Maybe once again, I honestly can't remember if I've gone deep into this before. I certainly have on social media, on TikTok and stuff, but on here about the future of Mike Tomlin, because I feel like the tide, it may have gone a little bit too far to be turned back the other way. Honestly, with what happened this last weekend with the loss to the Buffalo Bills, I don't think anyone can really, within Steeler fandom, can really complain. The Bills are a good team. Everyone thinks they can be Super Bowl contenders. They've not had the best year, but I still think many people would not be shocked if they ended up in the AFC Championship game. So losing to the Bills not really an issue, but the way that we lost was certainly a big one, and it may have come across your various feeds, your timelines, depending on, if you're not paying that much attention to what happens with the Steelers and depending on how much, crosses over from different fandoms. But Steelers fans are starting to show signs that they have had enough. The first one being the booing of Renegade, which may sound weird as a sentence, but when I give you the full details, it would make sense. Basically, the Steelers have their rally song. It's Renegade by Styx. It's a really good anthem. I really love it. I have 3 terrible towels, I think, with the Renegade lyrics on them. And it's usually meant to be played in like the 3rd or 4th quarter, usually the 4th, whenever the defense needs to make a big stop. If the Steelers are winning, but the other team's gaining momentum, or if the Steelers want to shut it down, or if they're losing and they need a big stop, it's played as a hype-up anthem. And it has been done since, I think, 2003, if I remember off the top of my head. And it's been a great thing. Steelers fans have loved it. However, they got tired of it and booed the anthem. The only thing I can really equate it to is going across other sports. I know that the Boston Red Sox play Sweet Caroline at some point as like a rally song and a thing, and I know it's got deeper connections, but that you when you go to a game at Fenway, you associate singing Sweet Caroline. When you go to Penn State, I think they have Zombie Nation. All these teams that have their songs and their things associated with them. The Detroit teams will have "Don't Stop Believing" because of their born and raised in South Detroit. All these teams will have their anthems. For Steelers, that is Renegade. To boo Renegade because they have had enough of what they're seeing on the field, and also because they don't think that Renegade is gonna really help them in the situation. That's just one thing that says, Steelers fans really don't think this team is going anywhere. The second, and by far the bigger one, is the fans shouting and chanting to fire Mike Tomlin. Now, again, to let those of you who are not within the Steelers fandom know, you may think from the outside that everyone loves Mike Tomlin because of what he does, because he brings stability, because he's never had a losing season, because of his brilliant press conferences where he comes up with various turns of phrases that can are somewhat witty, but somewhat can be inspiring as well. So he does have a lot of fans. He has had a lot of fans, but for a while it has been a good 50-50 split on whether or not Mike Tomlin is seen as a good coach and whether or not those people want to see him stay or go. It has been a good 50-50 split. But I think we may have crossed the point with what this Steelers team is doing this season and the fact that many people don't think that they can go on to win a Super Bowl, then it may be time for a rechange. You look at what's going on the field, the inconsistency at quarterback with Kenny Pickett before that, Mitch Trubisky before that, Mason Rudolph hanging on for the last years of Big Ben, Trubisky, Pickett, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph again. Just nonsense. Nonsense at quarterback. Offense not really being very inspiring. No wide receiver two, despite the fact that we've been crying out for it for a while. Defense, highest paid in the league, but performing the way they did against Buffalo, just shocking. They gave up the most rushing yards in the history of Heinz Field, Acrisure Stadium, whatever you want to call it. That stuff is inexcusable, especially when Mike Tomlin made a big point over the offseason that after the Baltimore Ravens ran for 200 plus yards on us in the playoffs, that stopping the run was going to be a point of emphasis. Made some signings, made some trades. We have the highest paid defense in the league. And then they go and do that. There's been a lot of chopping and changing over the years at Pittsburgh with the offensive coordinators, with everything. But the one consistent has been Mike Tomlin. And it comes to a point where there is no one left to blame. I said when it came to the offensive side of the ball, it went through a stage of, okay, Matt Canada is not good. We'll get rid of Matt Canada. Then Kenny Pickett had one game without Matt Canada. For the life of me, I think it was Mike Sullivan, who was the quarterback coach, played against Cincinnati, did rather well. So, okay, maybe it was an offensive coordinator thing. Okay, then the offense starts to struggle when Kenny Pickett was out. Okay, do we want to give him an offensive coordinator? Let's see what we can do. Okay, we'll go get Arthur Smith. A very good offensive mind in the NFL. Let's see what he can do. We're going to go with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. We're going to have all these changes. There has been a litany of issues with the offense. But at some point, it comes to a point of, right, you have what you want. We changed it. We changed offensive coordinators. We've changed quarterbacks multiple times. It can't be the system. It has to be you. And I think that is what people say same with defense. We've had so many things. There's only so much that you can blame the lack of Ryan Shazier. Because I'm still of the belief if he doesn't get injured, we go and win the Super Bowl that year. I'm convinced of it. We still haven't replaced him. Okay, it's been the best part of a decade since Ryan Shazier got injured, and you haven't been able to work out and find a replacement since then. when you've had the likes of Devin Bush and Patrick McQueen and crikey, who's that? Miles Jack. All these options. Okay, it can't be the players, it can't be the system. It has to be you. And I think a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans are done with it. And it is going to be interesting, really interesting to see whether or not this gets through to the higher ups in the organization. And Mike Tomlin himself addressed it today, saying, if I was in their shoes, I'd be angry as well. I'm paraphrasing here. But he said, we're in the sports entertainment business. And if we're not entertaining, then the fans have a right to be upset, and that's their way to express it. So I think we may be reaching the end of the road with Mike Tomlin. Now, I don't think that one bad season, if you want to call this we've had a couple of bad seasons, a couple of 8-8, 8-1 seasons, whatever, over the years. But I think if we have a losing season and that streak comes to an end, the question then becomes, do they give him one more season to right it? Especially with, okay, the draft is in Pittsburgh next year. We're going to give you, that one chance to try and fix the franchise, and then we're going to move on. Do they move on before that? The fact that he has built up so much credit with what he has done, with the stability that he has, I can see the Rooney sticking with him for at least one more year. Because I think that is what they value more than anything, is stability. I've said we may not have a very low ceiling, or a very low floor, rather. We are not the Browns. We are not the Titans. We are not the Jaguars. We are not the Jets, who consistently put up losing seasons. And to an extent, there's a level of respect to that. It shows you are not a bad team, but also we have a low ceiling compared to everyone else. We are not the Bills or the Chiefs or the Ravens who, consistently find themselves in and around the AFC Championship game. We haven't won a playoff game in, again, it's close to a decade now. But at what point do you have to take that gamble and say, okay, we're going to try and go another way with it? I hear a lot of people saying in the media, if Mike Tomlin gets fired, he'd find a new job within 5 minutes. And that may be true. Andy Reid found a new job within 5 minutes after he did a great job in Philadelphia. Things just weren't quite working out. They parted ways. He goes to the Chiefs and turns them into a dynasty. Eventually turns them into a dynasty with the help of Patrick Mahomes. And the Philadelphia Eagles were okay as well. They've won 2 Super Bowls since then with Doug Peterson and Nick Sirianni. So you can bottom out and struggle and still come back to it. So yes, there may be the risk of losing the stability, but I think most Steelers fans would accept, okay, we're going to have a 2 and 15 years, say, while we completely rebuild things. But we'll take that because at least with that, we have the chance to bottom out, get a very good draft pick. Because that's part of the other thing. With the stability, yes, we may not win a lot, but also we're not losing enough to be down in the draft to position ourselves to go and get a quarterback or a franchise-changing player. We're always in that 15 to 25 mark, and you've got to give up a lot to go and jump down into the top 5. It's not as easy as jumping from, it's a lot easier to jump from 5 to 2 than it is from 25 to 2. It is so much harder because you've got to give up so much because, again, all that talent is gonna go past. And the team that's given up that 5th pick is gonna want something good in return. Or the 2nd pick is gonna want something very good in return. More than just the 25th pick. You can get away with the 5th. You can't get away with anything further away. So it is going to be interesting to see how the Steelers address it this offseason. They're not going to fire him mid-season. They're just not. But in the offseason, they do have a very big decision to make. I think they're going to stick with him for one more year. If I'm being honest, I think it would be the wrong call. I think, as I've said, the tide has just turned within the fan base. There's only so much that you can bluff them with. And I just think it's too late. I think the fan base has lost itself, especially when you look at the road that we're going down now. We have the Baltimore Ravens this week. If we lose that game, which I think we will, then that could start us going off even further down the spiral, and then miss the playoffs. Then what happens? I just think they have a really, really big decision to make, and it'll be very interesting to see which way they go with it. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think they will or should fire Mike Tomlin, or do you think they will or should keep Mike Tomlin? There's 4 different ways we can go about this, and I want to know which way you personally are leaning. And with that, we move on to our next subject. And this is something that I wanted to not lead off with, but again, go into last week because I'm going to sound like I'm sort of obsessed with him, but the talk about him, and I am just fascinated by the whole situation because it could go down as one of the biggest misses in NFL history. It could go down as one of the biggest, gets. I don't know. But the Shedeur Sanders situation and what is going on in Cleveland with him, and if he is the future, if he is a franchise quarterback, if he is Tom Brady 2.0 for falling all that way in the draft, given all the hype, I'm just fascinated by how he's going. I promise I'm not going to make this a weekly segment, but I didn't get a chance to talk about him rather last week, obviously because I missed the show, and I was going to dive into his debut because if you remember previous episode, I said he has been given every single chance to succeed. All the stuff you want to talk about, how he wasn't ready, didn't have the snaps, bad opposition, whatever in his first game when he came off the bench, fine. But his second game, this first start, he had every single thing going for him. Full week against the Raiders, a bad team, no climate conditions because it's all indoors. He had everything going for him. And he didn't do too badly. For a rookie starting his first game in a situation like that, he did probably about as what I would have expected him to do. 11 to 20, which is 55% completion, 200 yards, a touchdown interception. Now, if that's a rookie in week 1, if that was Cam Ward in week 1 and he put up those numbers in a win on the road, against a bad opponent, you would say, okay, that's probably about what you would expect. He didn't go off for 6 touchdowns. He didn't rush for 200 yards or whatever. He did what you would have expected him to do. And then this past week against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, again, slightly back down to earth, a slightly more competitive and better team. Outdoors, it was a bit of a weird weather day around that part of the country, so factor that in as well. And he did okay. 60 and 25, so he upped his completion percentage to 64%, 149 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, took a couple of sacks, but again, didn't really do anything bad in a sense. Again, if a rookie is coming in against a very good San Francisco 49ers team in that situation, a rookie week 1 comes in and does that, you'd say that was pretty okay. So I think for the first two games of start, he has shown that he can be reliable for the Cleveland Browns. He can be reliable. I think that's probably about as kind as I can put it. He's not doing anything flashy. He's just getting the job done. The question then becomes, what do they do moving forward with him? Because as I've said, if he turns out to be good, what does that do to Dylan Gabriel? What does that do to Deshaun Watson? Because he's getting back healthy. He's still under contract and everything. What do they do with him? What do they do with Dylan Gabriel, who they took earlier in the draft, and got the precedent and got the first team reps and the start before Shedeur Sanders. But now that he's shown that he can be good, and if he keeps playing at this level through the rest of the season, I don't think the Browns can get away with benching him again. I think he is going to be their starter. If he plays like this, there's always a chance that things could come back down to earth. He doesn't have much tape in the NFL, so the teams are still getting a little bit taken by surprise by him. But once the weeks start to get up and they can see what he can do, the teams may be able to adjust to him. Or this could be, everyone rallying around him, but that rallying around him could wear off slightly. So this could just be a flash in the pan. But if he plays like this, they are going to have to start him week 1 next season. At which point the narrative begins or changes again to, did they make the right call in the end? And can he be a franchise quarterback? Or are they going to waste a year because he's not really a franchise quarterback? He's just a backup in the NFL. And the Browns have wasted another year of Myles Garrett's career. By the way, while I'm here, Myles Garrett, I just want to have a thing. I've never ever said a bad word about him. I've always said he's a brilliant player. I just said I always prefer TJ Watt over him. This year, I think he's changing a lot of people's minds. I would still take TJ Watt over him. He's had a bit of a bad, TJ Watt's had a bit of a bad season and is sort of showing some signs of decline. But I will give Myles Garrett his credit. If he goes and breaks the single season sack record, which he looks on course to do, he has that in his sights. All credit to him. But at the same time, I do not want to see him win Defensive Player of the Year. You cannot win Defensive Player of the Year. And I've said, you cannot win any awards if you have a losing record. They are 3-9 right now. They've just secured another losing record. You cannot win any award with a losing record. If you are that great, and Myles Garrett is great, I'm not disputing that. First ballot Hall of Fame of the way he's going. But your talent alone should be able to at least get a team to above 500. I'm not saying win the Super Bowl. I'm not saying go undefeated. But if you were that great and are doing this great, you should at least be able to make the plays at the right time to get your team to over 500. That's just me. But anyway, that's my Cleveland Browns talk for the day. Or for the week. For the episode. Call it what you want. But that's my Cleveland Browns talk. And with that, we move on to our roundup from around the league, where I just touch on some of the stories that piqued my interest. And I really do need to start with the Chicago Bears clinching their first winning season since 2018 with a win against the Eagles. Now, coming into this season, there were a lot of questions around the Caleb Williams-Ben Johnson pairing, about whether or not this was going to be the guy to sort of turn the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams around. Because, that franchise has been dying for a quarterback. Caleb Williams was meant to be the number one guy, but he's had his struggles in the NFL and is still showing some struggles. But Ben Johnson, offensive genius, look what he did with Detroit, all that sort of stuff. But how is it going to work in Chicago? There was some murmurings in the offseason about how Caleb Williams wasn't quite getting to grips with the system, starting off 0-2. And even then, when they got up some wins, they beat the Las Vegas Raiders, who we now know is a bad team, just by 1 point. Washington Commanders, again, struggling team by 1. All these sorts of things. But they have turned it around big time. 5 wins on the trot, including wins, again, this main one against the Philadelphia Eagles, who, they not exactly the dominant force that they have been previously, but are still Super Bowl champions. Pretty big. And for a brief moment, in fact, I think they might still be. I just need to actually check the standings here because I can't remember how things worked out after Thanksgiving. Are they still top of the NFC? I think they might still be. I think they might be top of the NFC. Let me just check this. I think they're top of the NFC, or did the LA Rams take that spot off them? Just need to double check this. Yeah, the Bears, number 1 seed in the NFC. The Bears, who have been disastrous for many years. Number 1 in the NFC. Kudos to them. Again, not only a winning season, but to do it in the way they've been doing. Absolutely fantastic. And I could not be happier for them, because that is a franchise that has gone through a lot, has struggled a lot. And now, again, it could just be 1 year, but to at least give them some glimmer of hope, especially in that competitive division with the Packers and the Lions. That is absolutely sensational. So kudos to them. Now for a team going from the bottom to the top, we go from the top to the bottom, and I talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. And after their loss to the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving, I'm starting to lose, or in my mind, they are starting to lose the benefit of the doubt. I've always said this season that yes, the Kansas City Chiefs may be a little bit wonky. They had a bit of a rough start without their wide receivers. The AFC West is looking competitive. But if they get in the right spot, even if they have to be a 6 or a 7 seed, as long as they can get those first few wins under their belt, maybe win 2 games going into the playoffs and get that momentum, they should be fine. With the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that benefit of the doubt has been lost, because if they can't if they can't keep winning these games consistently, these big games on a consistent basis, then you do have to start to wonder whether or not they will be able to get it done in the playoffs. Because if they can't win a game against the less than convincing, shall we say, Dallas Cowboys, again, they've got some good stuff, but less than convincing Dallas Cowboys, then do we really think that they could go on the road to beat the Bills and then, and they've beaten the Colts as well, but losing to the Chargers within their division already, losing to the Broncos within their division already, losing to the Bills, do we think that they're going to be able to go bang, 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 bang all the way through? Now, at this point of the season, staring at 6-6, I don't think so. So they are going to have to really, really sort themselves out if they are going to get back into what most people think is a good position to get in people's minds for that. I don't hear many people talk about the Chiefs as a Super Bowl team right now. Again, I'm not totally losing them, but they have lost about 50% of the benefit of the doubt when it comes to that, just by the way they've done this season and their recent loss against the Cowboys. And finally, the Monday night game last night, the New England Patriots absolutely going through the New York Giants. And I think Drake May at this point is the front runner for MVP. I think there are a lot of players who can put themselves in that talk. I know we've talked about Jonathan Taylor in the past. I know that there may be some that maybe even think Daniel Jones could be it because it's a quarterback thing and how well how well he did. Matthew Stafford I know has gotten a lot of talk, but I think when it comes down to it right now, if I had to pick one, I would go Drake May. And I know he's the betting favorite and whatever. And there's always room to finagle it a bit, but I think there's also the story element that goes behind him as well. The fact that he's could be the franchise guy to replace the guy in New England. Now, how many quarterbacks do they have to go through? But now they found Drake May, who can be that guy. So I think that's going to be very interesting moving forward. But at this time, as I record 5 minutes to 7 on Tuesday, December the 2nd, Drake May is the favorite for MVP especially after his performance against, again, the struggling Giants. But you've still got to show up in those moments, and he absolutely did. And then just finally, before we get on to the final segment, I've said it before, I'll say it again. We need to make everything reviewable in NFL. I was watching the end of the Commanders-Broncos game. That one false start, there was not a false start being called, and then the illegal grounding, or intentional grounding, rather, that got called when it was intentional grounding, and the NBC rules analyst said no, it wasn't because the player was, the throw was outside the numbers or whatever. Yep, I've said it before, I'll say it again. We need to make everything reviewable. I will be on this horse until the day I die. Give the coaches the challenges, let them challenge anything they want. But let's really get this serious because far too many games are being costed as a result of the refereeing decision. That is all the time we have for this show. I know I always end the show with something a little bit more lighthearted, but honestly, the past few days, I just really have not had the time to look around elsewhere in the world of sport. Just with this illness, Thanksgiving, and the little one, it's just been a bit of a nightmare. So I'm going to have to end the show there. Hopefully, nothing's too bad, or I haven't missed anything major. Funny that maybe you thought I would be talking about, but we'll have to see how it is. But that is the end of the show. As always, thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, leave comments, everything you need to do on this YouTube channel to make sure that you are part of the conversation moving forward. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe to us on our other social medias at Baldwin Sports Media on Instagram and TikTok, and at MRB Sports Media on Twitter. Give us a follow there. And if you are returning, then as always, thank you so much for making me a part of your week. I will be back. Illnesses and child pending, but I will be back next week to talk about plenty more in the NFL, especially this weekend of games. I don't know if you've seen the graphics. There's like 4 games where teams are going up against each other with identical records, and it's all for the top of the division. And it's all big weekend in the NFL. So I'll be sure to be talking about that. I'll be doing that next week. And until then, take care. And as always, stay safe.